The meeting called to order at 7:02. Our first order of business will be the roll call. President Barbosh.
Present.
Vice President Odira. Present. Director of Administrative Affairs Patel.
Present.
Director of Financial Affairs Salon. Director of Government and Legal Affairs Pearl.
Present.
Director of Student Relations Fox.
Present.
Director of Foreign Outreach Moore.
Present.
Director of Technology and Web Development Board.
Present.
Director of Organizations and Partnership Board. Sorry, that was an error. Vice Senate Surgeon.
Present.
Senator Nguyen.
Present.
Senator Weissmuller.
Present.
Senator Erickson.
Present.
Senator John LeBar. Senator Carter.
Present.
Senator King.
Present.
Senator Henderson. Our next order of business will be the approval of the agenda. I entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented. Vice Chair Sturgeon.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Is there a second? Senator Erickson.
I second.
All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? Abstentions? The agenda is approved as presented. Our next order of business will be the approval of the previous meeting minutes. I entertain a motion to approve the previous meeting minutes. Senator Carter.
Move to approve the previous meeting minutes.
Is there a second? Vice Chair Sturgeon.
A second.
All in favor, raise your right hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? The previous meeting minutes are approved as presented. I will now give the floor to President Bardwaj for the appointment of a new member to the
Persons holding office under Constitution of Student Government or any office established through bylaws or other legislative enactment shall take the oath of office. The oath of office shall read as follows. I state your name, do solemnly affirm that I will faithfully execute the duties of the office of, state your position, and will, to the best of my ability, enforce and observe the Constitution and Unified Student Code of the Student Government of the University of Michigan-Flint. Please repeat after me. I state your name,
I, Karen Holden,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of state your position
of Director of Student Organizations Partnership
and will,
and will,
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
enforce and observe
enforce and observe
the Constitution
the Constitution
and Unified Student Code
and Unified Student Code
of the Student Government
of the Student Government
of the University of Michigan-Flint.
of the University of Michigan-Flint.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Director of Organization and Partnership Board. Our next order of business will be our guest speakers. I now yield the floor to Ms. Patty Petrosky and Ted Johnson.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. All right. So, my name is Patty Petrowski. I am the Deputy General Counsel in the Office of the General Counsel. So, put shortly, I'm one of the university attorneys. And I have been very busy working on our sexual misconduct policy, which is what I am here to talk to you about tonight. See, there we go. So, the purpose of tonight's presentation is sixfold. I want to talk to you about the background that led us to developing an umbrella sexual misconduct policy. And then I want to talk to you about the documents that were created. We have an SPG, which is a standard practice guide. It's a policy for the university. There is an umbrella policy, a set of employee procedures, and student procedures. And I encourage all of you to ask any questions as we go. I'm happy to answer them. So in February 2018, President Schlissel announced at a Board of Regents meeting that he wanted to engage an external reviewer to look at our sexual misconduct policies. There had been a lot of work done around the student policies in the past, and the president's request that we engage an external reviewer was in large part driven around, one, I want to make sure that we have best practices across the board, but two, we focused a lot of time and energy on our student policies and procedures. I want to make sure that our faculty and staff policies and procedures also reflect best practices. And so the university engaged the law firm of Hogan, Marin, Battle, and Rose to conduct the external review. And the reason why we engaged this particular law firm is that one of the partners there had worked at the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, which is the governmental entity that is responsible for enforcing Title IX on college campuses. She had been the director of enforcement there for over a decade. And so we really wanted her expertise when we set out to do this review. So the review itself focused on reporting mechanisms, that is, how people who have been impacted by sexual misconduct could report their concerns to the universities, as well as the written policies and procedures that we have. And the review applied to institution-wide policies and procedures, as well as procedures that are specific to individual campuses, whether they be Flint, Dearborn, or Ann Arbor. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. So the review culminated in a report, and among other things, Hogan, Marin, Battle, and Rose had two primary recommendations. The first was that the university create an umbrella policy that would reflect a common set of definitions, information about resources, and reporting obligations that would apply to students, faculty, and staff across all three campuses in Michigan Medicine. And in addition, the external reviewer wanted us to revise our employee procedures and our student procedures so that they were consistent with the umbrella policy. And in case anybody's interested, you can find a copy of the report on the university's website. So following the external review, this is where I come into play. President Schlissel engaged a task team. There are 12 of us, and the charge of the task team was to create the umbrella policy and revise the student and employee procedures. And there are representatives from across all three campuses. Your representative is in the audience tonight, Kirsty Strobel. But there were people who, on a day-to-day basis, are really engaged with this work across the university, and our task was to draft these policies. And we started meeting together in February of this year, and we released the SPG, the umbrella policy, and the revised student and employee procedures to our community on October 15th. And we are soliciting feedback on those documents through November 22nd. And so if in the course of tonight's presentation, you have any thoughts or comments about how we might include this, or you want to speak to me individually afterwards, you're more than welcome to do so. We also have established a link to a survey so that people can go online and submit their comments that way if they want. You can do so in an anonymous fashion. So let me kind of walk through the 4 documents. I'll try to do it pretty quickly and then invite any questions or comments. the first, as I mentioned, is the standard practice guide. And the university has a set of these, which are overarching policies. And this particular policy is going to apply to all students, faculty, and staff. And basically, because the underlying documents, that is to say the umbrella policy, the employee procedures, and the student procedures were so lengthy, we decided to create a summary document, the SPG, that summarizes the key provisions of the underlying documents and links to them. The SPG is largely based upon the alcohol SPG, so there was a basis to do this. But the idea is if you're looking for an SPG on sexual misconduct, you'll find it, and then from there you can get a link to the operative documents. So let's talk about those operative documents. The big one is the umbrella policy. And what it attempts to do for the first time is to commonly define prohibited conduct for students, faculty, and staff. The forms of prohibited conduct are set forth on the screen. There are 9 of them in total. And in large part, we used all of these definitions under current practices. And you would be able to find them in the student policy, but you wouldn't be able to find them anywhere else. So I think that this is a big advantage of the umbrella policy, and it was one of the primary drivers behind it. The scope of the policy itself is limited to sexual and gender-based harassment and misconduct and sex discrimination. A lot of people have asked, does this apply to all forms of discrimination or sex discrimination? And because the laws surrounding sex discrimination and some of the requirements are very unique, we decided to limit this document in that way. So the policy also defines who is a responsible employee. And I'm sure many of you are wondering, what is a responsible employee? So the federal government requires institutions to identify responsible employees. Responsible employees are individuals who, when they receive information about sexual misconduct, will report it to the university. So let's assume for a moment that you tell Julie Snyder, who I just saw walk in over there, that you had been the victim of sexual misconduct. Julie is a responsible employee. She would have an obligation to contact Kirsty Strobel, who is the individual at the university who looks into allegations of prohibited conduct and, if necessary, conducts investigations. So this is the first time that we will have a common definition for responsible employees that applies to students, faculty, and staff. So irrespective of who experiences the sexual misconduct, if they tell a responsible employee, that individual needs to notify the university. And so responsible employee is defined as university administrators and supervisors and employees in certain designated positions in units or departments. Crystal clear, right? Well, not exactly, but the good news is that the policy does provide a list of categories of employees so that employees can go to the policy, literally look at the list and see if they would fall under it. And a failure to report could lead to discipline. So if the policy ever becomes effective, hopefully sometime at the beginning of the new year, I'm hoping that all of you hear a lot about responsible employees. Who are responsible employees and what their obligations are. Confidential resources. Confidential resources are individuals or groups of individuals who students, faculty, and staff can go to, and they have no reporting obligations. You can talk to them privately and confidentially. So the policy itself seeks to clarify and in some cases expand confidential resources across the 3 campuses. So let's talk a little bit about the employee procedures. So both the student procedures and the employee procedures are largely consistent with how we currently do investigations at the university. However, on the employee side in particular, there isn't one single document that you can look to that spells out all of the procedures. Instead, we've largely used a set of information sheets that either the claimant, the person who's experienced the sexual misconduct, gets when they make the allegation, or that the respondent, the person who's been accused of the sexual misconduct, receives when the university talks to them about the allegations. So now, for the first time, the employee procedures will set forth the process that all employees will go through when they have allegations of sexual misconduct. So there are a couple of key provisions that I want to highlight. So the Office for Institutional Equity conducts the investigation on the employee side. They summarize all of the evidence and then they render a finding or determine whether the person who was accused is actually responsible for the prohibited conduct. Employees do not have a hearing and their findings are not subject to an appeal. That being said, if there is a finding of responsibility and an employee is disciplined as a result of that, they can appeal the discipline or the sanctions through their normal grievance procedures. The investigation report will identify all witnesses by name. We currently do this on the student side, but this is going to be a fundamental change on the employee side. Part of, as I mentioned at the outset, the purpose of this review was to get us in compliance with applicable laws, to bring our employee procedures in particular up to date, and this is one such change that we have enacted. So parties and witnesses can request interim measures. Interim measures are accommodations. So I'm going to pick on you again, but let's say that you've experienced sexual misconduct and the person who you allege has done that to you is in a classroom with you or works with you. There are accommodations that can be made. Perhaps you want to take a different section of the same class, or perhaps you might want to work at different hours of the day. So parties and witnesses can request interim measures, and OIE in consultation with other university offices will approve or deny that request, and then human resources will ultimately implement it. Another fairly significant change in the employee procedures is that we have endeavored to lay out all the possible forms of discipline in the procedures. Again, that's not something that's currently done. The other thing is that if a sanction is rendered, if discipline is given, both the person who receives the discipline as well as the claimant, the person who made the accusation in the first place, will become aware of what the sanction was that was imposed. And so the last thing I just want to highlight for the employee procedures is the time frame. It will take 115 days aspirationally from the commencement of the investigation through to sanctions to finish the investigation. So student procedures. Let me just start by saying that each campus has its own set of student procedures. And right now, each campus has its own student sexual misconduct policy and procedures. We are sticking with that kind of under this new model. The documents are substantively identical. The difference is that each campus has different resources and different people who do different things. And so the document reflects that. But the process that I'm going to describe is the same across all 3 of those documents. So Flint's interim student sexual misconduct policy went into place in January of this year. And there were changes that were made to the policy as a result of a court case that was brought against the university. And the court case was all about whether students who are accused of sexual misconduct should be afforded a live hearing with an opportunity to cross-examine the parties. And we won at the lower court level, and then the plaintiff in that case, an accused student, appealed that opinion to the United States Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. And the Court of Appeals saw it differently. And what the Court of Appeals said is that if credibility is at issue, and if the possible sanction could be suspension or expulsion, then students should be afforded a live hearing with an opportunity to cross-examine one another, or they could have agents or advisors conduct the cross-examination. This was a big game changer nationwide. The Sixth Circuit was the first court to rule this way in the country, and so the university was obligated to respond to and comply with that opinion. And so the interim policy has been in effect since January, and we have been collecting feedback on that. And so the student procedures, both the interim policy and the student procedures that I'm going to talk about now, are also virtually identical. There were some changes in the student procedures to make them consistent with the umbrella policy, but overall, the process itself hasn't changed. So students generally have two options. One is an investigative resolution, and the second is adaptable resolution. And I'm going to talk about each of those for a couple of minutes. So, investigative resolution. What does that mean? If someone comes forward to the university and makes an allegation of sexual misconduct against a student, they can opt to have an investigation conducted. So the university would talk to both of the parties, talk to any witnesses that they identify, look at any other evidence that might exist, text messages, emails, sometimes there's videotape, and they summarize all of that evidence in an investigative report. That report is then shared with the hearing officer. So the university has retained 3 experienced trial attorneys to conduct our student sexual misconduct hearings. They get the investigative report. They have conversations with the accused student and the person making the allegations, and then they schedule a hearing date. And at the hearing officer will ask both of the parties and the witnesses a series of questions. Then, pursuant to that court case that we were talking about, the students can ask each other questions. Now, obviously, this isn't an ideal way to handle these things, but we were left with 2 bad choices. What we said to the court when we lost the case that I was telling you about is we filed a motion to reconsider, and we said, look, you've given us 2 bad choices. You either said that students have to question each other, which isn't great, because you could have a rapist questioning the student that alleged that they experienced this harm, and it could be very traumatizing and difficult to deal with emotionally. So that was bad choice number 1. Bad choice number 2 was that advisors, often attorneys for some of our students, could conduct the exam. The problem with that, however, is that not everyone can afford an attorney. So what do? Do you have one student with means who can afford an attorney, and another one who comes in with their mom or their dad or a friend of theirs who's supposed to conduct the questions. And what we said to the court was, look, neither of these are that great. We have a better idea. Why don't you let the hearing officer ask all of the questions? And unfortunately, the Sixth Circuit didn't see it that way, and they denied our request. So as between those two choices, we opted to have the students conduct the cross-examination, recognizing that this is a student disciplinary process. It's largely student-driven, and we wanted students to do that part of it. That being said, we do have provisions in the policy that talk about how we can use technology to make it easier on students. So in the hearings that we've already had this year, it's typically the case that the students are not in the same room at the same time, and that we use technology so that the students can hear one another, hear the questions that are being asked, and so that the hearing officer can see both of the students, those that are asking the questions and those that are responding. Both students have the opportunity to appeal the finding. So that appeal is conducted by a retired federal court judge, and they can appeal the finding or the sanctions. And similar to the employee procedures, the time frame for completing the investigative process is 120 days. The other form of resolution is called adaptable resolution. So what does that mean? The investigative resolution is largely a disciplinary process. The idea at the outset is there's going to be a finding, a determination of whether someone is responsible, and if it is deemed that someone is responsible, sanctions will be levied against him or her. Adaptable resolution is a little different. It's a non-disciplinary process in which the parties are brought together by a facilitator, an adaptable resolution facilitator or coordinator. And the idea is that the person who experienced the harm can talk about how that made them feel, what happened to them as a result of that, with the hopes that the person who is accused can accept some responsibility for the harm that they've caused. It doesn't result in any sanctions or disciplinary outcome at the end, but instead what might happen is that the parties can enter into an agreement that sets forth things that they want to have happen as a result of that. That could include educational measures, potentially counseling. It could ultimately be a separation of the institution by voluntary agreement. And so we only are going to do adaptable resolution if the claimant asks for it, if the respondent agrees to it, and if the Title IX coordinator deems that it's appropriate. I can safely say that it will not be appropriate in all cases, but I think that there are a large number of cases in which it could be appropriate, including some instances of unwanted touching. And with that, that's kind of a summary. I don't know if anybody has any questions, comments, feedback, concerns. I'm happy to take those now. I can also stick around for a while, and I'm happy to talk to anybody afterwards. You can always email me, or you can respond to the survey link that I mentioned.
Is this SBG already in effect?
No. So we're soliciting feedback right now. We're supposed to be doing that until November 22nd. And then we will take all of that feedback, decide what changes we might need to make. And then the hope is that sometime in the new year, all of the documents, early in the new year, all of the documents will go into effect. Yeah.
As far as feedback goes, so you said, so the option talking about that there's two bad options to the students. So for that option, that wasn't determined by, who came up with SPG. That was, that had to be implemented, right?
So the court basically said to us, you have to make one of these two choices. And the task team, it was actually a group of us prior to that had come up with that decision. And that decision was reflected in the interim student sexual misconduct policy that's currently in place.
Okay, so that's not great.
Right now,
Okay.
yes, but we still are collecting feedback on all of these
Even
issues,
that.
including that.
So for in the employee procedure, there was a point that says that employees would not get a hearing. What
Yes.
was the reason? I'm really just trying to get my.
Oh, yeah, that is a great question. And I have received questions just like that from leadership at the university writ large. And it largely kind of turns on this court case. Students have a fundamentally different relationship with the university than employees do. There are a couple of different types of employees. One of them, like me, and like I think all of the other employees in the room are called at-will employees. And we don't have any due process rights. So someone could say to me today, Patty, you've engaged in sexual misconduct, you're out of here. And that's kind of the end of the story. Whereas students do have due process rights. Now, faculty who have tenure are in a fundamentally different position. And there are all sorts of additional policies and procedures that the university has in play that would afford them some sort of a hearing were we to get to the point that we were talking about revoking their tenure or terminating their tenure at the university. Does that help to answer your question? It's a bit complicated.
So is there any federal policy that affects these changes that employees don't get hearing, or is it a university-wide policy that was implemented?
Another great question. So right now, there aren't any laws per se. I mean, the law is evolving in this area, particularly in case law. So it could be the case that in a couple of years from now, a court says no, and employees should have that. But right now, there aren't a lot of cases suggesting that. There aren't regulations or guidance suggesting that. The Department of Education does have a proposed rule that has been the subject of public notice and comment for the past year. And we are awaiting that final rule, which is supposed to come out between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And it's very possible that that could speak to it. And the reason why I say that is what the federal government said in the proposed rule is for students, you have to have a live hearing with cross-examination. And then they posed a directed question, which was, what would be the impact on colleges and universities if we had the same set of requirements for employees? So your question is a great one. It's very timely, and it's something that the federal government is thinking about as well.
Just last.
Yeah.
So does that differ for a student employee? Is it different for a student employee?
It is. Also a great question. So one of the things that the university has to determine whenever it gets allegations against a student who is also an employee is what set of procedures should apply. So we look at a variety of things, including did the conduct in question take place when the person was acting as an employee or while they were a student? And ultimately, the Title IX coordinator makes that decision. But it's not always the same answer every time. It's very fact specific.
Where is the policy specifically on the website?
That is a good question. I think I could get us there too, actually. Let me see.
Right there.
where I went to report sexual misconduct, and I believe it's somewhere around here. So, back up. Ah, here it is.
That's the draft ones and the current ones.
Okay. Does that help answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Where's the office? You talk to, is it? Person.
Yeah, we're looking at each.
So like, just in case someone comes,
Yep, I'm gonna let her answer that question.
Yeah, so I'm located in HR in the University Pavilion, so 213.
Oh, is there like a phone number they can call, just to talk to someone, just in case it happens, like, there's no adult around, there's no employee around? Like, can they just call?
So, there is, in the policy itself, and I can probably find it. I don't know what Flint has in terms of 24/7 resources. I know the university has SACAC, the Sexual Assault Prevention and Awareness Center, which is based in Ann Arbor, and they do have an on-call service that's available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Are you guys aware of any?
For 24/7, we would refer usually to the YWCA, which has the 24-hour crisis response and the same nurse. Or you can always call our DPS as well.
And that was gonna be the other thing that I mentioned, you know, in the case of the true, I mean, if it's an emergency, certainly, anyone should feel free to report the conduct to the police. We always encourage that. Any other questions, comments, feedback? All right. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. Like I said, if anybody wants to talk about this further, I'm always available, so just feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I now yield the floor to the Director of the Center of Gender and Sexuality, Heather Johnson.
I'm representing her. She was able to be here today, but my name is Sarah Deva. I am a sexual assault advocate in the Center for Gender and Sexuality. Just kind of exactly what we just talked about. I'm here to just kind of give you a general overview of what we do and some stuff that we have upcoming and opportunities for opportunities. So the Center for Gender and Sexuality and Sexuality, if you don't know, we promote, learning opportunities, conversations, discussion around all things sex and gender. A lot of people I know currently notice the LGBTQ stuff and the sexual violence stuff, and while we are very good at doing that and we love continuing to do that, also don't forget that if there's anything that you can think of within the sex and gender scope, we are willing and able to do something with. But again, we do educational opportunities, we do resources and referrals within the community, we have capital gown loans if you can't afford to purchase one. As a sexual assault advocate, I am one of your confidential resources if you wanted to report, or not even report, but just come to someone about sexual misconduct. I can walk you through the process and help you report if that is something you should do. We have our peer educators that some of you may know, who are students just like y'all who create content and deliver it based off these themes, usually sexual violence because they're not much for. And then we are a community, what's that? Oh, sorry.
Okay.
We are a community safe space, so in our office in 213 USEN, we have an open area, people can come do their homework, read painting, whatever, something out. If you have any additional questions about sexual violence programming, you can feel free to reach out to me or Heather, the director. So I'll hand this out while I continue. These are just kind of info cards, our mission, stuff that we go over. As far as collaborating, again, we're open and willing to do anything. I know last semester we did the incentive program, where 2 groups did complete it. So they came to a certain amount of our peer educator info series and received that. And so anything like that you would want to do in the future, any collaborative programming, just let us know. We are open and willing. If you want to let us know about the trans, I should have handed this out. This is going around. We have Transgender Day of Remembrance coming around. It's a memorial luncheon on November 20th. That's going to be at noon in Riverfront Breakfast Center. It's open to the community. It's free, but you need to sign up through Eventbrite because we anticipate it being a large event. So we want to guarantee you a spot and give you your food needs and all of that. But we are going to have the Assistant Attorney General, Sunita Durmani, come and talk about she's the head of the Hate Crimes Division. So she's going to come and talk about that. And we have, who else do we have? the Fair Michigan, I want to make sure I said it right, Fair Michigan Justice Project will provide concrete examples of their work to raise awareness about persistent stigma and discrimination experienced by the LGBTQ community. So this event is kind of to memorialize those that we've lost who are transgender, who were murdered because of their identity. So it's kind of memorialize them, talk about the issue, and hear about what is being done currently in Michigan. So it's really great that we have these people here. So I'm gonna go back around again and give you an info, and the link to the sign up should be on here as well.
Thank you so much.
Our next order of business will be director reports. President Marbosh.
Hello, everybody. So today, first of all, I would like to welcome Director Hopley on our student government team for the Director of Student Organization and Partnership Board. We welcome you to Marbosh, the dear administration. So yesterday, State of Student Address was attended by a lot of students, faculty members, and Chancellor Cabinet members as well. I just wanted to say a couple of key points, an announcement that was made yesterday at the State of Student Address, and I just want to read that out to our viewers online, as well as our student government members and guests. Student support is necessary for student success. The academic guidance and mentorship provided by faculty go far to help us reach our goals, and the assistance provided by the dedicated staff ensures that our academic experience is complemented by a rewarding and efficient campus experience. I and the students that I represent thank you for those efforts, but it is not enough. We as students also desperately need increased financial assistance. From scholarship that offset tuitions to gifts that enhance our experience, we simply need more financial support from donors and alumni. But we as students recognize that we need to also play a part in encouraging more financial support of the university. So I'd like to announce that student government has unanimously committed 100% of our representatives to give a gift on Giving Blue Day toward the food pantry. Further, we would like to challenge the entire campus community, faculty, staff, and alumni to follow us in this effort. As a student government president, I have been a strong supporter of the Wolverine Food Den, and I will be supporting that effort with my gift and encourage you to join me in solving the problems of food insecurity on our campus. But should your passions for student success lie in some other program, know that your gift, no matter the size, will contribute to the student success. And for this, our goal that was pointed out yesterday would be approximately $15,000 to end food insecurity on University Michigan-Flint campus for the next 3 years. This is a campaign that we will be working on, and we will be working with staff council, faculty council, and other administration, and hopefully we are able to achieve this. If you have any questions regarding this, please contact us and we can talk more about it. Our project on micromobility transportation, which we're talking about e-scooters on campus, we have chosen to work with a local Flint company, Commute, rather than working with a company that was on a nationwide scale. I think it really puts a statement forward that we're here to support the local business. As far as how the update on this project is going on, tomorrow I will be meeting with the Director of Recreation Center, Director of Facilities and Operations, and Department of Public Safety to see where this project can go, and we can bring more of this opportunity on campus. I met with the provost today, and we discussed the key initiatives that are taking place on campus. We also discussed about the HLC accreditation, and I would want all our student government members to be working with that and attending as many forums as possible. I will also be attending a diversity forum on November 5th If you have any concerns that I should bring up, please let me know. The Administrative Affairs Advisory Committee will be meeting early December, and our representative for that will be Director of Admin Affairs. And I have urged the committee chair to contact student government for any changes. We have had multiple university committees that are still wanting to meet, and they haven't yet. Some of them have started meeting, and some of them have not. And we wanted to make sure that the communication was streamlined through the council's chair as well as through the Office of Provost. With that, I yield.
Thank you. In terms of my report, this week I was able to work very closely with the senators on just understanding the issues we have and helping to streamline the process of being a senator in student government. I was also able to work with Senator Henderson on creating a strategy for students to know more about student government by tabling every week all around our campus. And this coming week, I will be working on collaborating with our nearby universities on projects and just seeing what they're up to so we can all collaborate and work together. And with that, I yield. Director of Administrative Affairs.
Hello everyone. So as we were talking about our bill for free giveaways, I work with Senator Carter, and the bill will be presented today in the General Assembly. I met with Elizabeth Svoboda yesterday, and we have access to LibGuide, so we are looking into uploading our updates in there. The meeting minutes from last time were approved today and will be sent out in the next 24 hours.
Director of Financial Affairs, Sal.
Hello everyone. Sorry for being it. Just want to get ready to report. So the budget sheet has been finalized. It's been made accessible to all members of student government on the Google Drive. If any members from the student community would like to see what the student government budget looks like, please feel free to reach out to me. We made a few payments for some of our events that just happened to stay at the student address. We made payments to EPS and Picasso. We also ordered our blue books finally, and we should be getting 500 of them by the end of the week, and hopefully the other 500 by next week. Funding board allocated $1,500 to the Indian Student Association for an event that they have every year called Raleigh Night. And I also reached out to get financial statements for student government just so we can, at the end of the month, align our own financial statements and expenditures with our actual spending, and see how we're operating. And then aside from that, the funding board minutes have also been uploaded onto the student government website, and anyone can view this like that.
Director of Government and Legal Affairs Group.
Hello, everyone. So the draft for the new constitution was presented last night at the executive board meeting, and will also be presented tonight at the Senate meeting to go over so that everyone can review it, look for possible changes, and make it the best that we can for continued review processes. I'm also happy to say that I have a name tag agreement signed by everybody, so that's really cool. So if you don't have the name tag, we'll be getting you those soon. The Government and Legal Affairs Committee met and went over the Constitution and made some final changes before it was presented. And next week we'll be meeting again to continue to work on the revision process. I've also been working on the proposed legislation, policy, and procedure for this administration. We went over it last night in exec board, and we'll be going over it today in Senate and continue to work on it. And with that, I yield.
Director of Student Relations, Fox.
Hello. Last Friday, the Student Concerns Committee met, and some important notes were discussing the Hear My Voice program, which is a program that's been around for quite a while, a couple of years, but not many people know about it today, and that ties into something else they discussed, which was how to effectively communicate with students. And they were bringing up ideas through either social media, digital signage, word of mouth, flyers. And the conclusion was that it's individual per school, and I believe the administration is currently working on how to figure out what works best for University of Michigan-Flint. As well as they want to develop a central location for students to provide and receive information, maybe further better utilizing Blackboard or Engage, as we already have systems where students are able to have access to communally.
as well as a discussion was brought up about a shuttle between Ann Arbor and Flint campus, and, arguing over weekly versus daily and how we provide funding for that. Furthermore, for the Student Relations Committee, I worked with the Vice Chair of Senate, Senator Sturgeon, to contact Chief Ray Hall regarding safeguard concerns, and I'll be meeting with him this Friday, as well as I was preparing a committee agenda for that committee. And for the State of Student Relations event, I attended the event itself as well as tables for it, and it went well. Thank you for all those who showed up. With that, I yield.
Director of Technology and Web Development, Jordan.
Hi. So far what I've been working on this last week was I got in contact with ASGA, the American Student Government Association, and their website wasn't working properly because it's under construction. So I was able to contact them and work with them so we can get all the student government members' accounts on there so we have access to all the resources to help us. I have also been updating our website, specifically our committee pages, with any information the directors send me weekly. And I've also worked with the director of Patent Affairs regarding uploading our meeting minutes to our website. She has just gotten LibGuides training, and right now we're considering whether we should use LibGuides or if we're going to use some other platform to upload the meeting minutes. And and also just I'm going to take the new Student Organization Partnership Board Director. I'm going to take their photo and make sure we upload it in bio. And I also took a new senator's photo and bio, and all that should be up on the website soon. And with that, I yield.
Director of Student Organization and Partnership.
Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give a short introduction of myself. So I am the new Director of Student Organizations and Partnership Board. I am also soon to be the President of the College Athletic Association and the Risk Management Chair for Phi Sigma Sigma. I applied for this position because student government has always been of interest to me. I've always been very interested in politics. It is my major. I am also very involved on campus. I'm a part of those two organizations. I have also attended meetings with other organizations, which is why I am great for this position. With that, I yield.
Vice Chair of Senate Sturgeon.
Hello, everybody. I would just first like to congratulate Director Colby on her position. For my report, I attended the parking committee meeting last week, and I started scheduling one-on-ones with any senators who would need them. For my caucus, at the parking committee meeting that I attended, I got approval for my survey flyers to improve communication between the parking committee and the student body. My next order of business is getting those flyers approved from the Student Involvement Leadership Office. I also worked with Director Upmore and the Foreign Outreach Committee on the resolution for our conference upcoming. For the Senator of the Week, for this week, unfortunately, he is not here, but Myron is going to be Senator of the Week. So congrats to him. And with that, I yield.
Director of Board Outreach.
Hi, everyone. So a lot of this week consisted about working on the resolution for higher education funding. My committee's done a lot of research, editing, fact checking. So we actually delayed our committee meeting this week, and we attended donuts with the dean. And it was a really great success. We got some great feedback from students that we're going to be typing up and working on and getting out to all of you. Other than that, though, the committee has been really working hard, so I want to give props to them. That resolution is going to be done by this evening, and you will all get a copy as soon as it's done. So if it comes out at 2 o'clock in the morning, please excuse me, but I'll be up working on it. The SPSU conference is next weekend, and the resolution will be presented there and then voted on at that conference, and I will let you all know how that turned out. I sent the SPSU conference link to Director Hopey so that she has the opportunity to attend with the rest of the delegation. Everyone attending the conference will receive an email from me tonight regarding travel and forms that need to be filled out on Engage to get to SIL. I had a phone call this evening with the Vice President of External Relations at Grand Valley regarding our action plan for higher education funding and editing that on the state level, and that.
We are now moving on to the advisory
First, I'd like to congratulate Director Fox on her successful state of the student address. Just want to remind students, Monday, November 4th from 11:15 to 12:10 is the drop-in session for students for the HLC accreditation visit. That's Monday, November 4th. I'll wait till you get your pen. Monday, November 4th from 11:15 to 12:10 in the happenings room. That is the drop-in just for students, and there will be food provided. As well as then on Monday, there'll be other sessions, and the flyer went out that are specific to specific criteria that we've been talking about. Students are welcome to attend that, but that's a joint session with faculty, staff, and students. So if you can't attend at 11:15, you can pop in at an other open forum on Monday. Okay. The only other thing is mark your calendar for September 11th for the next donuts with the deans. It'll be myself and Dean Bob Barnett from the School of Education and Human Services. It will be 145 in the loft. That's November 11th. And to that, I yield.
You are now moving on to Senator reports. Senator Hall.
Hi everyone. So this past week I attended the donuts with the team at school management. Here to voice my concerns for my fellow peers since I am in that school. I worked on a Senate bill that provides funding to purchase food for my caucus event. I met with Val and Kat this morning to figure out the logistics of my inside workshop. I attended the funding board meeting and I also attended the state of the student address. Plans for next week is continue working on my caucus, meet with CAPS if needed, and attend funding board consideration meetings. And with that, I do.
Senator Wiseman.
Hello. Last week I met with David Luke at the Agricultural Center for feedback on my caucus and possible collaboration. I tabled for student government to promote the State of the Student Address, and I attended the State of the Student Address yesterday. And for this week, I plan on tabling for a Halloween event going on here on campus tomorrow, representing student government. And with that, I yield.
Senator Erickson.
Good evening, everyone. So throughout the week, I've continued to work on my caucus, which I know has been a long process, but I have came to meetings on this, and I finalized my focus on working and implementing programs and events geared towards residents, specifically on weekends. As a resident myself, and hearing feedback from many others, there is a lack of interest for students to stay on campus. So I am going to work on improving that. I also met with Chris Deulis, the Associate Director of SAL, last Thursday in regards to this, and I'm planning on contacting others pertaining to my caucus. I also attended the Government and Legal Affairs Committee meeting and discussed a lot about the upcoming events and revisions for the new Constitution, and we are all very excited about that. And yeah, with that, I yield.
Senator Carter.
Okay. This week for my labor rights event caucus, I was attempted to reach out to the campus activities board again to attempt a collaboration with them. So I have learned that there is an online form I can fill out in regards to that, so I'll be doing that. And also attempted to get in contact with Beth Manning at HR to discuss like possible themes or topics that the event could cover, but I'm yet to hear a response from her either. I also attended the Government and Legal Affairs Committee meeting as well as the committee meeting for the College of Arts and Sciences Academic Standards Committee. Thank you.
Senator King.
Oh, good evening, everyone. Last week I planned to meet with Karen and admissions pertaining to my caucus. This week I tabled for the State of the Student Address. I went to donuts with the dean, my fellow senators, and Director Upmore, and I heard some of their concerns from the students. And this week I met with Karen and admissions. We had a great productive meeting. Next week I plan on meeting with Nicole. I was directed to Nicole regarding admissions to set up a date to start going to high schools pertaining to my caucus, and I plan on attending the Student Relations Committee. With that, I yield.
And Now open the floor to any university committee reports. Vice Chair Sturgeon.
So as I said in my report, I did attend the parking committee meeting last Thursday. So at the meeting, we reviewed the fall 2019 space usage report. What that means is DPS went around to every single parking lot, parking structure on campus and that are related to campus, and counted how many spots were being used from midnight to midnight, so the entire day. It showed that there were a variety of different areas that went down to zero, where there was 0 parking spots available, and it also did show there are plenty of other parking spots available in other lots. In regards to enforcement, DPS has put a board in the Hubbard building as to what passes are available and what each pass looks like. For example, there's a temporary handicap pass, there's an employee pass, there's a student pass, and a few others. So if you're interested in what those look like and what passes are available, they do have a board in the Hubbard building now. In regards to blue parking in the pavilion, faculty and staff can buy parking for $30 in better spots in the pavilion. And last parking meeting, we did vote to add 3 more parking spaces, but I ran into the problem of people have been parking in those particular spaces. PS signage has not been made a priority, so we did vote on emailing facilities to make signage a priority so that those parking spaces are open. We also talked about any requests and concerns from the students and faculty. The physical therapy department reached out and requested designated parking at the White Building in regards to any guests that they may have for the physical therapy program. For example, if a guest has a Parkinson's disease and or any disability, they requested to have 3 to 5 parking spaces for those departmental guests. The parking committee voted to allocate them 3 spaces. We also talked about faculty member put in a concern about extended vehicles. There's only certain lots that allocate for extended vehicles and have the actual room for them. So any extended vehicle can park in lot A, and there's overflow for any vehicle in lot Q, R, or S over at the White Building. The student concern that also came up is limited parking in lot A and the Hubbard lot. You can also, if you see someone who is parked over the lines, they're not in the spot, or they're just parked bad, and you would think, yeah, someone will give them a ticket. You can also report that to DS, although it's not an emergency or a priority. If you report it, they will take a look at it. So if you guys have any problem with any of that, and it has been a concern with students, you can always call GPS with those concerns. And then Director Fox did give me some concerns about Safe Ride, and I did bring them up at the parking committee, and Director Fox is going to be following up with Chief Ray Hall at a later date. And with that, I yield.
Are there any other university reports? Senator Carter.
Today, I attended the College of Arts and Sciences Academic Standards Committee, where we reviewed petitions to our satisfaction, continued editing our handbook, and and off the continued editing of the handbook to a voluntary subcommittee.
Are there any other?
The Academic Affairs Advisory Committee will meet on November 6th.
Any other university?
I can't remember the name. It's scholarships.
Scholarships award and special events.
Okay. That's a little bit. Yes, we attended that with faculty members. It was knowledgeable about commencement speakers. It was empowering to hear their messages and what do other college students go through in life and how they overcome it.
If there are no more university reports, we will not close the We will now move on to our new business, which is Senator Bill 2019-002. I now yield the floor to Senator Gordon.
this is Senate Bill 2019-0002 for the student debt coming to buy a couple of free promotional items for us to hand out. Also, let's specifically make 200 pairs of pet gloves, and as well as 700 vinyl stickers, the fact that we can place on the laptops. We got door fees so we can hand out at or tabling for various events and just promote. So we hope to allocate $1,200 for this. There is a bit of a buff. It won't cost all that, but we just included a bit of a buffer there. Thank you.
Are there any questions or comments regarding this bill? Vice Chair Sturgeon.
When this bill was presented at the last Senate meeting, we had voted on getting 500 of each promotional item. Is there any particular reason that number changed? Okay.
So, the budget's made available so everybody can see it themselves. The thing is, we've already, like when we drew up the budget, we allocated a certain amount to freebies, and a reminder that the freebies subsection within the budget was also used for Skytones and Blue Books. So that already reflects the amount, and there isn't an amount that was initially presented for 1,000 of those items, considering the cost of those. So it would entirely deplete and exhaust the budget.
Does that answer your question? Are there any other questions or comments from either member of the student government or our audience? The floor is now closed for questions and comments. Are there any other questions, comments, or concerns for our audience? I now open the floor to the members of student government for any questions, concerns, or comments. Director Epler.
I just wanted to let everyone know that TAP is having an event November 14th. It's a silent disco. It's going to be in the happenings room, and I'll get you all more information.
Are there any more? Dr. Stein.
So I just want to support Director Rowley in the work that his committee's been doing on the Constitution revision and set an expectation that after it's presented tonight, every senator needs to review it by the deadline that Director Rowley will give you so that we can move on to the next step. For those of you that are not aware of the process, in order for the Constitution to be changed, it needs a full student referendum. It needs to be posted for 2 weeks, and we are on a tight timeline at this point. So your attention to this matter this week is imperative. That I know.
Are there any other questions, comments, and concerns from our audience or members of the board? All right, the floor is now closed. Meeting adjourned at 8:10.
Sorry, just using it. Yeah, I think we need to.